My name is Nick Jones. I'm from San Diego, California. I'm 25. I just returned to BYU in June, did a summer term, and I got married in August, so I've been married for about 6 months now, and it's been fantastic. Is there, just keep going?
Yeah. Tell us who you are.
So, yeah, I'm really glad that you guys are doing this campaign. I think it's absolutely necessary, and there's a lot of people. I don't think you realize how many people you're going to help. I know for me, mental health issues are something that's really affected our family for, my entire life. And before that, my mom has definitely had some significant struggles, and her father too, and she grew up with it, and it's just something that's been pervasive in our home. And I grew up, my parents divorced at a young age, and I never thought that my life would turn out like that. I never thought that I would have the same struggles that she did. And my struggles are unique to me, as they are for anyone. But definitely, looking back, it took years for me to recognize and admit that there was something going on. But when I finally did recognize that, I had serious depression, I was able to look back on the last 8 to 10 years of my life and recognize some strong indicators that that's what had been going on. And it definitely affected me. It affected me in high school, because it's something that really kind of penetrates your sense of self-worth, and there's really no explanation to it most of the time. There are a lot of things that are circumstantial, that are difficult and challenging. Like, for instance, my parents splitting up. My brother passed away when I was young, and those things, of course, naturally, depression and feelings of sorrow, those are gonna come naturally. But when it's ongoing, and when everyone else around you seems to be living their life and they're happy and confident and things are going right for them, but you just wake up and you don't want to get out of bed in the morning, and there's no reason. You can't think of any. There's no reason to it. It is, and it's something that just affects you. You don't know why. You didn't ask for it. But I think back to Elder Holland's talk in 2013, and when he related, mental health struggles to any other sort of sickness. And I hate to use that word associated with mental health, because I don't want people to think that they're sick. I think it needs to be distinguished as something else, but it does need to be recognized and treated accordingly. And like Elder Holland said, if you had cancer or a malignant tumor, I think is the word that you would do everything you could to get it treated. And it's the same thing with this. And unfortunately, there is that stigma in our society, that for whatever reason it's not okay to talk about mental health, or it makes you look weak, I guess. I never really understood that, but it's something that, how can I say this? It's just something that is so prevalent among everyone, and yet it goes so unnoticed. And that's the irony of depression, anxiety, bipolar, whatever you may be struggling with, is that it's everyone around you, to some extent or another, is dealing with something, and it just goes so unnoticed. And that's why I think what you're doing here is absolutely crucial, and it's going to help a lot of people. So yeah, that's a little bit of my background. I don't know. Do you have any specific questions that?
I do have a couple.
Yeah. Okay.
You said you struggled this kind of throughout your life. It's something
Mm-hmm.
that has affected your family, that's affected you, and there were circumstances that kind of led up to it, but it is a history that you've had.
Mm-hmm.
So where do you feel like you're at in your story now? And by that I mean, we get some people come in who they didn't realize that they were struggling with mental health till they got to college. And some people who it was just kind of a short period in their life. And some people who are still in the middle of their story, still trying to figure out how mental health affects them, how they are going to be able to move on. So where do you feel like you're in this story? Like, are you at the beginning of your struggle with mental health, kind of still in the middle, like you're still figuring it out? Or do you feel like you've come to the end? And by that I mean not the end of like it's done, it's over, it's finished. It's more like you feel like you have a good handle on your mental health and things that have helped you in that sense.
Yeah, I definitely feel like I'm toward the latter part of that. Like I'm able to deal with it. I feel like I finally got a good handle on things. It's still something that comes up, but I mean, life is gonna deal things at you that you just have to bear. So I mean, it's never over, but it's definitely manageable, and it's something, when I recognize that those like feelings of like isolation are starting to come on, I know that it's going to pass and that it'll be all right. And I have tremendous support system in my wife and my parents and friends, and that's totally because I was able to be open with them about that. And that's the hardest thing to do at first, when you first recognize and admit, like, wow, this is really something that I'm dealing with. But when you are able to share it with people who you trust, and I think that's the important thing to remember is, don't just start going around talk to the people that that love you and that you can trust first, because when you come to that point, you're really vulnerable, and it's really, really critical that you kind of are in a safe place. And by that I just mean, really trusting people that that you can trust and that love you. And so, yeah, I definitely feel like today I have a good handle on it. I'm able to function. I'm able to do all the things that I ever wanted to do. I'm in school at BYU. I truly believe, this was like the end game for me. Like I just wanted to come to BYU so badly. Everyone in my family had gone to BYU, and because of my struggles, as a teenager with mental health, those sort of had a chain reaction into other series of unfortunate events, and kind of put me in a position where when it was time to go to college, I didn't have the grades to get into BYU, so I wasn't initially able to. And that's something that that definitely contributed to I guess feelings of low self-esteem, and especially at that age. I mean, still now, it's impossible to not compare yourself to your peers. And so all the kids that I'd gone to seminary with and grown up with, most of them were going to BYU, and I don't want to say that's the thing that had the biggest impact on me, but it definitely was something that weighed on me. And so to be here now is I feel like I've finally proven something to myself. Like, I can work through hard things, and I can reach goals that I didn't think were going to be attainable in the past. But that's just part of it. I mean, being at BYU is wonderful. I think it's to me, I kind of beat it to death, how great it is. I think it's just kind of the perspective I have. But really, and I don't mean to go off on too much of a tangent here, this is a plug for BYU, but it really is the greatest value on earth as far as your education. I mean, monetarily, yeah, it's subsidized, but as far as just the quality of people who are here, I don't think that you could be anywhere, especially for me, like with the struggles that I've had, where you can be more honest and trust people and your professors, your peers, who are going to support you. And certainly the gospel, has a lot to do with that. People here are good people because of the way they live their lives, and that is attributable to gospel standards for sure. No, go ahead, please.
I was just going to say, so you said that obviously being here at BYU is something that's helped you, and getting here was a big moment for you, because it proved to yourself that I can do hard things. What are some other specific things that have helped you to rise above the issues that you face? Things that could be used by other people, and obviously there are things that work better for some than others, but what are some things that have really helped you?
So in order to answer that question, I think that I need to go back and talk about the things that I struggled with the most, just in order to provide some perspective. And I don't mind getting honest. I think that it's necessary to be able to help people to open up. And so for me, where it took me was when I was 19, I had a son, and he was born out of wedlock. And we'd managed to the point where, of course, when it first happened, it was like we didn't know what we were doing, and it was just a big mess. But we did finally come together and decide that we were going to get married and make the best of it. And so when it was just a hard few months, but things started, as the pregnancy went on, things started to look like they were getting better, and that we were getting more organized. I was working and able to save money, and we were going to go back to school, and we were going to make it work. It wasn't going to be the conventional, kind of cookie cutter way things are usually done, especially in the church. But we were going to make it work. And then when he was born premature, about 6 or 7 weeks. And his life was never really in critical danger, but it was still something that was like a huge surprise to us, and it wore heavily on both of us. And he had to stay in the hospital for about a month to let his lungs develop before he could come home. And during that time, my relationship with his mom really just fell apart. I think just after he was born, things just totally turned around, and I still don't know all the reasons why. Obviously it's pretty apparent why things could be challenging in a time like that. But a few months later, she decided that she didn't want to move forward with our relationship, and so that kind of upended everything. And that's when my depression really started to get real. Like I was saying, circumstances can bring it on. But yeah, that definitely just drove me down. And I had friends who were not LDS or members of the church, and they did things that LDS kids don't do. They drank and experimented with drugs and things. And none of them, their lives weren't out of control. They just didn't share the same standards as I did with the people I knew in the church growing up. And so I eventually thought, well, what the heck? It seems like this is a good outlet for people when they're stressed. And so I started to dabble in that, and that was a terrible, terrible mistake, because addiction is something that runs in our family. It's genetic, and it took off really, really fast for me. It wasn't something that kind of gradually developed, and it got really bad. And over the next 2 or 3 years, it was something that I struggled with, and I would go out, and at first, it was really like, for me at least, I thought it was like a good distraction, and I was in denial about like any problems I had, and I just thought that, this is a good way to just like forget about my problems. And then, there was an aspect of it that was kind of fun. There was that social aspect, but it was all just an illusion. And the back end of that, things weren't fun. And that went on for about 3 years, where I would struggle for several months at a time, and things would get really bad. I'd go away from home and go stay with friends on their couches, and but then I'd realize how bad things were, and I'd get desperate, and I'd try and get sober, and I would maintain sobriety for several months sometimes, but I never really got the help that I needed, and eventually, because of people who loved me relentlessly, especially my mom and dad, I was able to, when I was desperate enough, I was able to realize, I have people that will help me through this. And I didn't know, when I finally made the decision to get sober, I didn't know that I could do it. I'd kind of proven to myself at that point that I had no control over my life, and I didn't think that I could ever be, especially like where I am now, back in school and married, and I was able to marry my wife in the temple, and I never would have thought that, but it got to a point where I really just was entirely desperate, and it was the lowest point in my life. I was 23. I just turned 23, and I got a really strong impression from the Spirit, and I hadn't felt that feeling in years. And it drove me to my knees and had me just really plead. And I don't want to say that, like, from that moment everything just started to turn around, but it definitely was a turning point. And each day I felt a little bit stronger. I still struggled, but during that time I was able to get a handle on my depression and take the necessary steps to make sure that it was under control. And I worked at a 12-step program. I've worked with people in AA, and I've worked with the church's addiction recovery program, which is phenomenal. I think most people think that the ARP and the church is just for pornography, but it's for everything. It's for substance abuse, it's for alcoholism, it's for any form of addiction. And really what it comes down to is working a 12-step program. It comes down to letting the atonement work in your life and building and maintaining a relationship with the Savior. And out of any medication or therapy or anything that I've gotten, nothing compares to the impact that that's made. And that's what drives me each day and allows me to maintain that faith and hope. There's a scripture in Alma 34, at the end of Alma 34, it says, and have patience and bear with those afflictions and have hope that one day you will rest from all your afflictions. And that's something that I just carry with me. And I can testify to that. I've absolutely seen things turn around in my life. It's been a process. And there's been a lot of ups and downs. It wasn't smooth. But it's definitely been so much easier and manageable once I really did turn things over to the Lord. And that is really what enabled me to do everything else that was necessary to get a hold on things. It's what gives you the strength to move forward. And I would just say to anyone who may not be able to feel like they can talk about what they're going through right now, to really just get on their knees and plead and ask for guidance and for the help that they need, because it's not something that, at least in my experience, it's not something that I was capable of doing on my own. So, yeah, sorry to get real with you, but
No, that's exactly what we were looking
yeah.
for. Honestly, thank you so much.